Welcome to our session on the classification tool or the GBV classification tool. This tool standardizes how GBV incident types are defined by using a set of 6 core types of gender-based violence. It also standardizes the procedure by which incidents are classified through a process of elimination that determines the most specific incident type that applies to the reported incident. As we go through this video, I want you to take a piece of paper and write down on a Post-it note or a notebook what you think what your response to the GBV type would be for these incidents on the screen. And there's no wrong answer. Just write down how you would classify or define the type of GBV for each example on the screen. So first, a woman reports being beaten by her husband for not cleaning the house properly. How would you classify that incident? What would you write? Next, a girl reports that she was only allowed to attend school after she had sex with her teacher. In example 3, a boy reports that his uncle has been touching his genitals. In example 4, a woman reports that her boss is threatening to fire her if she does not have sex with him. And in example 5, a woman reports that she was raped by a group of men when she was walking home from her sister's house. So just keep that piece of paper near you. We'll come back to this later with how you defined these incidents of gender-based violence. One of the things that I want to talk about here, as you were identifying those without any real guidance, is the problem of subjectivity. So when classifying GBV, subjectivity really is a problem. And to combat this, we need standardization. So a woman reports being raped and badly beaten to a caseworker. And that caseworker works for an NGO that provides services to GBV survivors. On the intake form, the caseworker has classified the incident as rape. A week later, a different woman reports being raped and badly beaten to a different caseworker. That caseworker works for the same NGO as the first caseworker, but this new caseworker classifies the incident as physical assault. Because there's no standardization in that process, we're getting irregularity. And standardization is the process of creating consistency and regularity. Without standardization, variation between and within organizations is negatively affecting the accuracy of our data and the effectiveness of interagency information sharing and coordination. And that example I shared just kind of highlights how that could happen. What do we need for standardization to work with incident classification? We need to standardize the types of GBV and their definitions. We also need to standardize the procedure for classifying an incident of GBV. If we just have one of those and not the other, we're not standardizing. So the point here is that there's 2 steps to standardization. It's type and definition and process of classification. And there's more. When we were developing the classification tool, in addition to having standard types, definitions, and processes to choose one of those types, we had 3 other criteria that we needed to consider. First, we needed to have universally recognized forms of gender-based violence. We needed to focus on the specific act of violence. This is separate from the motivation behind it or the context in which it was perpetrated. So in order to have a type, again, focusing on the violence, not the context or the motivation. And then the types of violence needed to be mutually exclusive. They couldn't overlap. And that's how we came to the 6 types of GBV as a part of the classification tool. I'm going to go through those now and read the definitions. So the first standardized type of GBV in the standardized definition is for rape. Rape is the non-consensual penetration, however slight, of the vagina, anus, or mouth with a penis or other body part. It also includes penetration of the vagina, anus, or mouth with an object. Apologies. It includes penetration of the vagina or anus with an object. So, just to reread that definition to you, rape is the non-consensual penetration, however slight, of the vagina, anus, or mouth with a penis or other body part. It also includes penetration of the vagina or anus with an object. Next, you have sexual assault. Sexual assault is any form of non-consensual sexual contact that does not result in or include penetration. Examples include attempted rape, as well as unwanted kissing, fondling, or touching of genitalia. Female genital mutilation and cutting is an act of violence that impacts sexual organs and, as such, should be classified as sexual assault. This incident type does not include rape or where penetration has occurred. Physical assault is an act of physical violence that is not sexual in nature. Examples include hitting, slapping, choking, cutting, shoving, burning, shooting or use of any weapons, acid attacks, or any other act that results in pain, discomfort, or injury. This incident type does not include female genital mutilation or cutting. Forced marriage is the marriage of an individual against her or his will. Denial of resources, opportunities, or services is the denial or right of rightful access to economic resources and or assets or livelihood opportunities. The denial or rightful access of education, health, or other social services. Examples include a widow who's prevented from receiving an inheritance, earnings that are forcibly taken by an intimate partner or family member, a woman who's prevented from using contraceptives, a girl who's prevented from attending school. Reports of general poverty should not be recorded as an example or as denial of resources, opportunities, or services. Then you have psychological and emotional abuse. This is the infliction of mental or emotional pain or injury. Examples include threats of physical or sexual violence, intimidation, humiliation, forced isolation, stalking, harassment, unwanted attention, remarks, gestures, or written words of a sexual and/or menacing nature, the destruction of cherished things, and of course, there are other examples too. The GBVIMS incident types were developed in order to standardize the classification of GBV incidents for data collection purposes. Regardless of the incident type, the survivor should be able to access any service they need. Next, we have the process of elimination. This is how you're going to determine the type of GBV. So we went through the types and the definitions, and now we're at the standardized process of elimination. To do this, you ask several questions and you follow this process. I'm going to turn my laser pointer on for this. So first, did the reported incident involve penetration? If yes, you'll classify this as rape. If no, you'll ask, did the reported incident involve unwanted sexual contact? If yes, you'll mark the incident as sexual assault. If no, you'll then ask, did the reported incident involve physical assault? If yes, then the incident is marked as physical assault. If no, you'll ask, did the incident involve a case of forced marriage? If yes, then you would mark the incident as forced marriage. If not, you would ask, did the reported incident involve the denial of resources, of opportunities, or of services? If yes, then it's marked as the denial of resources, opportunities, or services. If no, you then ask, did the reported incident involve psychological and emotional abuse? If yes, then you'd mark it as psychological and emotional abuse. If no, then you'd ask, did the reported incident involve GBV? If yes, start over and go through these questions again until you're able to accurately identify the type of GBV. If no, then this would not be a case that qualifies for GBV case management. Now we're going to go through some examples to classify these incidents using the classification tool and coming up with our standardized answers. So for this first example, a young girl reports that her neighbor inappropriately touched her breasts. Was this an act of rape? No. Did this include unwanted sexual contact? Yes. So in this example, we would identify the incident as sexual assault. The next one, an old woman reports being beaten at her home by her husband. If we go back to these questions, this did not involve rape. This did not involve unwanted sexual contact, but it did involve physical assault. So we would mark this example as the GBV type physical assault. In the next example, we have a woman reporting that she came home from her work and her boyfriend took the money that she had earned. This does not involve rape. This does not involve unwanted sexual contact. This reported incident did not include physical assault. This was not a case of forced marriage. But this did involve the denial of resources, opportunities, and services. So in this example, where the woman had made money and it was forcibly taken from her by her boyfriend, the GBV type would be marked as denial of resources, opportunities, and services. Next, we have a girl who's forced by her mother to have sex with peacekeepers to earn money for her family. If we go back to those questions, the first one that we're asking is, did this involve penetration? Yes, it did. Sex took place in this incident, and therefore, penetrative sex took place in this incident, and therefore, we would mark this GBV type as rape. This, I think, is a good example of how GBV classification does not take into consideration the context. In fact, it's just focusing on the act of violence itself. That does not mean that this will impact case management and the holistic services that the survivor needs in this instance. So I want to pause here and make sure that we're emphasizing that this is just a data point. This is not going to impact how the survivor receives support. This is just a standardized data point that we collect. So I want to make sure that we're still emphasizing the importance of the entire case management process because that's where context comes into play. Okay. Finally, in this example, a woman reports that her husband forced her to have sexual intercourse with him before he would give her money to feed the family's children. We're going through this standardized type, definition, and process of elimination. Did this incident involve penetration? Yes. We stop there. We classify this incident as rape. That does not mean that there are not other types of violence taking place in the context of this incident. In fact, part of the reason we go through this process of elimination is because these incident types often include, and we know they often include, the other types of violence that are included in the process of elimination. So denial of resources is also happening here, as is psychological and emotional abuse. And these are all supported in the case management process. But again, for GBV classification, for standardized reporting purposes, we go through these steps. All right, we're going to classify some more incidents. A girl reports the night before she was supposed to be married against her will. She ran away. She would like you to help her prevent the marriage from taking place. So we're going to go again through the process of elimination and ask the questions. Was penetration involved? No. Was unwanted sexual contact involved? No. Was physical assault involved? No. Was forced marriage involved yet? No. This has not actually taken place yet. There is a threat of forced marriage. So as we go through these questions, denial of resources, and eventually come to the classification of psychological and emotional abuse because the forced marriage has not yet taken place. All right, in this next example, a woman reports to you that she was forced to marry her late husband's brother the day after he died, and since then she's been locked in a room alone until she escaped this morning. If we go through the process of elimination, we will identify that the survivor is reporting an incident of forced marriage. Clearly, there's other emotional abuse taking place, but because of the process of elimination, we would identify the GBV type as forced marriage. Let's go back to the classifications at the beginning of this session that you wrote down your answers to. We had several different examples that we were classifying without the use of the tool. And I'm curious, as you go through this exercise and reflect, what you're noticing about those responses that you have and how we would respond to the type of violence that we would indicate using the GBV classification tool. So a woman reports being beaten by her husband for not cleaning the house property. This is not involving penetration or unwanted sexual contact. The third question, does this involve physical assault? Yes. So we would mark this as physical assault. Is that what you wrote? I'm curious. Next, a girl reports that she was only allowed to attend school after she had sex with her teacher. Maybe, I'm not sure what you wrote, but the correct response is rape because the first question was penetration involved. The answer is yes, penetration was involved. So this GBV type would be classified as rape. A boy reports that his uncle has been touching his genitals. Was penetration involved? No. Was unwanted sexual contact involved? Yes. So this would be identified as sexual assault. How does that compare to what you wrote down? A woman reports that her boss is threatening to fire her if she does not have sex with him. Was penetration involved? No. Was unwanted sexual contact involved? No. Was physical assault involved? No. Was forced marriage involved? No. Was the denial of resources, opportunities, or services involved? In this specific example, no. But was psychological or emotional abuse involved? Yes, there was threat there, and that classifies as psychological and emotional abuse. And that is how we would classify this response. Is that what you wrote down? And then finally, a woman reports that she was raped by a group of men when she was walking home from her sister's house. If we're, again, using the classification tool, this would be identified to be an act of rape. There was penetration, and that's how we would classify the GBV incident. With the classification tool, there's a lot of questions that come up that we see over and over again. So I want to talk about some of those here. One question that comes up is what happens when there's multiple survivors? How would you mark the GBV type for multiple survivors? The answer here is that each survivor is receiving individual case management support, and therefore each survivor is filling out, or you're filling out on their part, an intake form for each one of them individually. So therefore, each survivor would have their own GBV type classified. Another common question is about what happens if there's multiple incidents over a period of time. This is frequently seen for acts of intimate partner violence, which we'll talk about too. If there's distinctly separate incidents over time, even if they happen within the same day, we recommend using multiple intake forms. So maybe a survivor was physically assaulted on her way to work. That's one distinct incident of violence. Then at work, her boss threatened to fire her if she did not have sex with him. That is psychological and emotional abuse. Those are two distinct incidents of GBV that have occurred, and therefore you would use multiple intake forms, even though they occurred in the same day. You would use one intake form if multiple incidents of GBV are perpetrated over a period of time as a part of the same event. In that, you would use the most recent violence for classification purposes. For example, a survivor may have been kidnapped for 3 days and over these 3 days experienced multiple incidents of violence. You would use the most recent incident that they're reporting, that they're seeking services for, to classify that incident. If during one visit, a survivor reports many incidents from their past, such as rape or physical assault by an intimate partner, use your judgment and document individual incidents if possible, or if incidents are too numerous to document them all, then only use one intake form and document the most recent incident. When we went through the classification tool, we talked about, is this incident an act of GBV? And maybe the answer is no. Non-gendered violence can include child abuse, so physical or psychological abuse that's not gender-based. It can include domestic arguments or problems that are not reflective of gender inequities. So maybe there are arguments that are centered around children with behavioral problems. That's an example of non-GBV. For incidents of abandonment or denial of paternity, these are normally classified as denial of resources, opportunities, or services, or psychological and or emotional abuse. If a woman was financially dependent on the father before pregnancy, this would be denial of resources. But if the woman was not financially dependent, then you could classify it as psychological or emotional abuse. We talked a little bit about female genital mutilation and cutting. Because this is an act of violence that impacts sexual organs, again, this would be classified as sexual assault, not physical assault. We're not in person to do this exercise together, but I would encourage you, if you've had incidents reported to you in the past that you might not be sure how you would classify them, using the classification tool to seek out a facilitator or a supervisor or someone in your program to help you identify how you would classify those tools. Thank you so much for joining this session on the classification tool, and I look forward to seeing you in our next session on informed consent.